The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed like distant thunder, casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floor of St. Hope General Hospital. It was just past midnight, the air thick with the metallic tang of antiseptic and the faint, underlying rot of fear. Nurse Amelia Reynolds wiped her brow, her shift dragging into its 13th hour. When a small figure slipped through the automatic doors, the girl couldn't have been more than 8, her dark curls matted with sweat, clutching a crumpled backpack like a lifeline. Her eyes, wide and haunted, darted around the waiting area as if expecting monsters to emerge from the vending machines. She was Lily, though no one knew that yet, tiny, trembling, with a purple bruise blooming across her cheek like an ugly flower. Amelia spotted her immediately, the child's isolation screaming louder than any siren. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling down despite the ache in her knees. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" Lily didn't speak at first. Instead, she thrust a folded piece of paper into Amelia's hand, her tiny fingers ice cold. The note was scrawled in crayon, the letters uneven and desperate. "My dad hurt my mom bad. She's bleeding a lot. Please help. Don't tell him I'm here." Amelia's heart clenched, a cold wave crashing over her. This wasn't just a scraped knee or a fever. This was a cry from the shadows, the kind that hospitals like this saw too often, but never enough. She glanced around. No parents, no guardians. Just the girl standing there, shoulders hunched against an invisible storm. As Amelia guided Lily to a quiet corner, wrapping her in a thin blanket that smelled faintly of bleach, the weight of the note settled like lead in her chest. She radioed for security and a social worker, her voice steady but her mind racing. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent life, car horns blaring, distant sirens wailing. But inside, time stretched taut. Lily finally whispered, "He gets mad when we don't listen. Mom tried to stop him tonight." The words hung in the air, fragile as spider silk, painting pictures Amelia wished she could unsee. Shattered glass, muffled screams, a mother's desperate grasp for safety. The nurse held the girl's hand, promising silently that this nightmare wouldn't swallow them whole. Word spread quietly through the hospital corridors, a ripple in the night shift's weary rhythm. Dr. Nathan Hale, the on-call physician with a jaw set like weathered stone, reviewed the note and called in reinforcements. But before the authorities could even arrive, the ground seemed to tremble. It started as a low rumble, vibrating through the walls like an approaching freight train. Then the roar, deep, guttural, a symphony of engines that drowned out the beeps of monitors and the murmur of patients. Headlights pierced the darkness outside, slicing through the rain-slicked parking lot like searchlights. One by one, they pulled in, Harley-Davidsons, choppers gleaming under the sodium lamps, their chrome accents catching the glow like stars fallen to earth. Ethan Iron Caldwell was at the front, his broad frame cutting an imposing silhouette astride his black beast of a bike. At 42, he was a man forged in the fires of forgotten wars, his leather vest patched with the emblem of the Iron Oath Riders, a brotherhood of 200 strong, scattered across the dusty backroads from the desert flats to the mountain passes. Ethan's face was a map of scars, a jagged line across his left eye from a roadside ambush overseas, faint lines around his mouth from years of biting back regrets. He'd hung up his dog tags a decade ago, burying himself in the roar of engines and the code of the road. But tonight, a single phone call had shattered that fragile peace. It came from an old contact at the hospital, an anonymous tip about a girl, a note, a family fracturing under the weight of hidden violence. The convoy numbered nearly 200, a sea of leather and steel that turned the parking lot into a makeshift rally. They weren't storming in with fury. No, these were men and women who knew the cost of chaos. Ethan dismounted first, his boots thudding against the asphalt, the scent of rain and exhaust clinging to him like a second skin. He strode toward the entrance, his crew fanning out behind. Veterans like Marcus, with his prosthetic arm glinting under the lights, and Lena, a former combat medic whose eyes held the steel of quiet resolve. "We ride for the broken," Ethan had said over the crackle of his phone earlier that night, his voice gravelly with the echo of old oaths. "That girl's note? It's a promise waiting to be kept." Amelia looked up from the nurse's station as the doors swung open, the rumble fading to a hush. Ethan loomed there, helmet tucked under his arm, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that cut through the fluorescent glare. "Heard about the kid," he said, his words measured, carrying the weight of miles traveled. "Name's Ethan. We're here to make sure she and her mom get what's right." Lily peeked from behind the curtain, her fear easing just a fraction at the sight of these unlikely guardians. The hospital staff exchanged uneasy glances. Cops hadn't even shown, yet here was a wall of bikers, not with threats, but with a silent vow etched in their postures. As the first drops of rain pattered against the windows, Ethan knelt to Lily's level, his massive hands gentle as he offered a worn bandana from his pocket. "You did good writing that note, kid. Bravest thing I've seen in years." She nodded, clutching it like a talisman, and in that moment the air shifted. This wasn't an invasion, it was an arrival. The Iron Oath Riders had come not to conquer, but to stand. Outside, engines idled like patient beasts, their lights forming a protective halo around the building. Amelia felt a spark of hope amid the dread, perhaps in this cynical world. Honor still roared louder than silence, but as the social worker arrived, clipboard in hand, and the details of the note unfolded, Ethan's mind drifted to his own ghosts. 20 years ago, he'd made a promise under a blood-red sunset in a far-off desert, to protect the innocent no matter the cost. He'd failed once, losing a brother in arms to the shadows of betrayal. That failure had carved him hollow, driving him to the road where promises could be chased on two wheels. Now, this girl's plea echoed that old vow, pulling him back from the edge. He glanced at his crew, their faces illuminated by the dashboard glow of idling bikes. Families forged not by blood, but by the unbreakable bonds of the ride. The night deepened, the rain now a steady drum against the roof. Inside, Lily's mother was wheeled in on a gurney, her face pale and streaked with exhaustion, signs of struggle evident but unspoken. Ethan watched from the hallway, his fists unclenching slowly. The authorities would come, protocols would grind forward, but the biker's presence was a statement. No one fights alone. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, tinting the sky in hues of bruised purple, Ethan knew this was just the beginning. A single note had summoned a legion, and in its folds lay the thread of redemption. For the girl, for the mother, and perhaps for the man who'd almost forgotten how to keep his word. The engines revved once more, a low promise rumbling through the lot, ready for whatever road lay ahead. The rain had thickened into a relentless sheet by the time the first patrol car sliced through the parking lot, its blue and red lights fracturing across the wet chrome of the idling bikes like shattered stained glass. Ethan stood just inside the hospital doors, his silhouette framed against the glow of the emergency room, arms crossed over his chest as if anchoring the storm outside. The Iron Oath Riders held their ground, a phalanx of leather-clad figures unmoving under the downpour, their engines purring in low unison, a heartbeat against the chaos. Lily's mother, Sarah, lay in a curtained bay, her breath shallow and ragged, the monitors beeping a somber rhythm that echoed the tension coiling in the air. Amelia hovered nearby, her scrubs damp from a quick dash outside to coordinate with the arriving social worker. She caught Ethan's eye, a silent question passing between them. How far would this go? The note in her pocket felt heavier now, its crayon words a spark that had ignited something far beyond the sterile walls of St. Hope General. Sarah had been stabilized, stitches for the superficial wounds, fluids to counter the shock, but the real damage lingered in the shadows of her eyes. the way her fingers twitched as if still warding off blows that had come too close. "She's asking for Lily," Amelia murmured to Ethan, her voice low amid the shuffle of nurses. "But we can't let her see the girl until we know it's safe." Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening under the faint stubble that caught the fluorescent light. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers pulling their comrades from the rubble, in the rear-view mirrors of late-night rides, when memories clawed their way back. 20 years ago, under the relentless sun of a desert outpost, he'd sworn an oath to a dying friend. "Watch out for the ones left behind. No one gets forgotten on my watch." That friend, Jake, had been more brother than blood, taken by a betrayal that still soured Ethan's dreams. The iron oath had risen from those ashes, a crew of wanderers, ex-soldiers, mechanics and survivors who traded dog tags for handlebars, binding themselves with promises etched in ink and steel. Tonight, that old vow had roared to life through a stranger's whisper on the line. The social worker, a wiry woman named Grace with a clipboard clutched like a shield, pushed through the doors, her raincoat dripping onto the tile. Behind her, 2 officers, broad-shouldered and badge-heavy, scanned the lobby with practiced suspicion. The lead cop, Officer Daniel Reyes, paused at the sight of the bikers visible through the glass, his hand instinctively drifting toward his holster. "What's this circus?" he grunted, his voice cutting through the hum of the vents. Grace shot him a warning glance before approaching Amelia. "The child's note indicates domestic distress. We need to separate them. Question the father if he's located." Ethan stepped forward, his presence filling the space without a word, the scent of wet leather and motor oil trailing him like a signature. "Father's not here yet," he said evenly, his tone a gravel road, smooth but unyielding. "But we're not going anywhere until this family's protected." Reyes bristled, eyeing the patches on Ethan's vest, the iron fist clasped in an oath-bound chain, symbol of a brotherhood that answered to no badge but their own code. "This is official business, pal. Step aside before we clear the lot." The air crackled, the rain's patter outside amplifying the standoff. Marcus, the veteran with the prosthetic arm, shifted in the doorway, his mechanical fingers flexing with a soft whir. A reminder of battles fought far from these fluorescent-lit halls. Lena, ever the medic, leaned against a pillar, her gaze steady on Grace. "We've got stories like this in our ranks," she said quietly, her voice carrying the lilt of someone who'd patched wounds in war zones. "Promises broken in the dark. We're here to mend what's frayed." The officers exchanged looks. This wasn't the usual vagrant crew. These riders moved with purpose, their bikes lined up like sentinels, headlights cutting swathes through the storm. Inside the bay, Sarah stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to the blur of white curtains and beeping machines. The pain was a dull throb, but the fear was sharper, clawing at her chest. Lily, where was her daughter? The last thing she remembered was the argument escalating, the crash of furniture, her body shielding the girl as best she could. Now, in this haze of morphine and regret, voices filtered through, authoritative tones clashing with deeper, rumbling ones. She gripped the bedsheet, knuckles whitening. Amelia appeared at her side, squeezing her hand gently. "Your girl's safe, Sarah. She's with us, but we need your story to make sure it ends right." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, tracing clean paths down her pale cheeks. He lost control again, swore it'd be different after the last time. But the bottle, the temper, it's a cycle I can't break alone. Her words were whispers, laced with the exhaustion of too many close calls. Amelia listened, her own heart aching with the familiarity of it all. In her years at St. Hope, she'd seen families splinter under invisible weights, promises turning to dust. But tonight felt different. The rumble outside was a counterpoint, a force that didn't bend to the system's grind. Back in the lobby, tension simmered as Grace reviewed the note, her expression softening at Lily's childish script. The girl herself sat curled in a corner chair, the bandana Ethan had given her tied around her wrist like a bracelet of courage. She watched the exchange with wide eyes, peeking at the bikers who now formed a loose perimeter, their presence a buffer against the unknown. Ethan knelt again, this time speaking to Grace. "We know the system's slow. We've waited on it before, lost good people to the delay. Let us stand watch. No trouble. Just backup." Reyes hesitated, radio crackling with dispatch chatter. Word had trickled up. No priors on the Iron Oath, just a rep for community rides and quiet aid. With a grudging nod, he stepped back. Fine, but one wrong move. The threat hung unfinished, swallowed by the storm's howl. As the officers moved to secure the perimeter, Ethan signaled his crew. They dismounted fully now, forming a human chain that blended vigilance with restraint, some offering coffee to weary staff, others sharing stories in low tones to ease Lily's fears. Dawn crept in reluctantly, the rain easing to a mist that veiled the lot in silver. Sarah's condition stabilized further, her vital signs steadying like a ship finding calm waters. But as the first rays pierced the clouds, a new shadow loomed. A battered pickup truck rumbling into view, its driver, Lily's father, Victor Kane, stepping out with bloodshot eyes and a forced smile that didn't reach his face. He scanned the scene, confusion twisting into wariness at the sight of the bikes. Ethan straightened, his hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. The air thickened once more, charged with the unspoken promise that this confrontation would test every oath forged in the night. Victor approached the doors, his boots scraping the wet asphalt, oblivious to the eyes tracking him. Inside, Amelia alerted the team, her pulse quickening. The bikers didn't advance, they waited, a wall of quiet honor. In that suspended moment, Ethan felt the weight of his past converge with the present, the desert oath, Jake's last breath, the road's endless call to protect. This wasn't about vengeance. It was redemption's slow burn, a promise kept not with fists, but with the unyielding stand of those who'd chosen family over solitude. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled, mirroring the fragile truce, while the first light gilded the chrome, hinting at roads yet untraveled. The pickup truck's door creaked open with a metallic groan, releasing Victor Kane into the misty dawn like a spectre emerging from the fog. His flannel shirt hung loose over a frame softened by years of neglect, and his eyes, red-rimmed and shadowed, flickered with a mix of confusion and simmering defiance as they took in the sea of motorcycles lining the lot. The Iron Oath riders stood sentinel, their postures relaxed yet coiled, leather vests damp from the night's rain, the faint scent of cooling engines mingling with the earthy petrichor rising from the asphalt. Ethan felt the shift in the air, a subtle tightening, like the moment before a storm breaks. He kept his hand steady on Lily's shoulder, the girl's small frame tensing beneath his touch as she peered through the glass doors. Victor paused at the threshold, wiping rain from his brow with a calloused hand, his boots leaving muddy prints on the threshold mat. The lobby's fluorescent hum seemed to amplify, casting his face in stark relief, lines etched deep from regrets unspoken, a jaw clenched against the weight of his unraveling world. "Where's my family?" he demanded, his voice rough as gravel, echoing off the tiled walls. Officer Reyes stepped forward from the nurse's station, hand hovering near his belt, while Grace clutched her clipboard tighter, her expression a mask of professional calm. Amelia lingered in the background, her gaze darting to Sarah's bay, where the monitors continued their steady beep, a fragile lifeline in the brewing tempest. Ethan rose slowly, his height unfolding like a shadow lengthening at dusk, positioning himself between Victor and the inner corridors. "They're safe," he said, his tone even, carrying the low rumble of engines idled long into the night. "That's all that matters right now." Victor's eyes narrowed, scanning the biker's vest, the iron emblem glinting under the lights like a challenge. "Who the hell are you? This ain't your business." The words hung heavy, laced with the bitterness of a man cornered by his own demons. Behind Ethan, Marcus shifted, his prosthetic arm catching a glint from the window, a silent testament to battles that left more than scars. Lena moved to Lily's side, offering a reassuring nod, her medic's instincts sensing the girl's rising panic. The lobby thickened with unspoken histories. Victor had arrived expecting the quiet unraveling of another night, perhaps a tearful reunion, a promise to do better. But the wall of riders shattered that illusion. He took a step forward, fists balling at his sides, the air between him and Ethan crackling with restrained energy. Reyes interjected, voice sharp. "Easy now. We're handling this by the book. Step back, sir." But Victor's gaze locked on Ethan, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps fear crossing his features. Whispers from the crew filtered through. Tales of men like Victor, broken by the bottle and buried traumas, lashing out at the ones they swore to protect. Ethan's own past echoed in the moment, the desert heat, Jake's fading voice promising a future neither would see, the oath that had pulled him from the abyss of isolation. Inside the bay, Sarah heard the voices rising, her body tensing against the crisp sheets. The morphine dulled the edges of her pain, but not the flood of memories. Victor's laughter in better days, turning to thunder in the dim light of their cramped home. Lily's cries pulling her from the floor, time and again. She'd hidden the bruises under long sleeves, clung to his vows of change whispered in the aftermath. But the cycle had worn her thin as frayed rope. Now, with the rumble of bikes still vibrating through the walls, a spark of something new ignited, hope, fragile as dawn's first light. Amelia sat beside her, voice soft. "He's here, but you're not alone anymore. Tell us what you need." Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the call button, her whisper barely audible. "Just keep Lily away from him, for good this time." Grace moved to intercept Victor, her clipboard a barrier as she guided him toward a side room for questioning. "Mr. Kane, we need to talk about the incident. The note from your daughter, it's serious." Victor's face paled, his bluster cracking like dry earth under pressure. "Note? What note? This is a misunderstanding. I never—" But the words faltered, his eyes darting to the curtained bays, searching for the shapes of his family. Ethan watched from the lobby, his crew forming a subtle arc, not aggressive but unmovable, their presence a living oath against the darkness that had driven Lily to flee. One rider, a grizzled veteran named Tyler, with tattoos mapping old wounds, murmured to another, "Seen too many like him. War changes folks, but it don't excuse the fallout." Cool, the confrontation unfolded in measured beats, the rain outside tapering to a drizzle that pattered softly against the panes. Victor slumped into a plastic chair under Grace's steady gaze, his story spilling out in halting fragments. Stress from a dead-end job, the bottle as a crutch after his own father's shadow, promises to Sarah that dissolved like smoke, but beneath the excuses lay the truth. Raw and unvarnished, the shove that sent her crashing into the table, the fear in Lily's eyes that mirrored his own buried shame. Reyes took notes, his expression neutral, but the biker's silent vigil pressed in, a moral weight heavier than any badge. Ethan stepped into the room briefly, not to accuse, but to listen, his eyes meeting Victor's with the unflinching clarity of a man who'd stared down worse storms. "We all carry ghosts," he said quietly, the words landing like distant thunder. "But hurting your own? That's a chain you break, or it drags everyone down." Victor looked away, the fight leaching from him as the weight of the night settled. Lily, peeking from her corner with Lena's arm around her, saw her father, not as the monster of the dark, but a broken figure, diminished by the light of consequence. As the sun climbed higher, gilding the mist-shrouded lot in golden hues, the hospital exhaled. Sarah agreed to a protective order, her voice gaining strength with each word, while Lily clutched the bandana tighter, a symbol of guardians she'd never expected. The Iron Oath Riders began to disperse in pairs, engines coughing to life with a chorus that vibrated through the building, not a roar of triumph, but a steady hum of solidarity. Ethan lingered, exchanging a nod with Amelia, whose eyes held a quiet gratitude. This was redemption's quiet forge, not in grand gestures, but in the stand taken when the world turned away. Yet as Victor was escorted to wait for further processing, a shadow lingered in Ethan's mind. Whispers from Grace hinted at deeper ties, rumors of Victor's connections to local shadows, men who twisted justice for profit. The oath called again, pulling the riders toward an unseen horizon. The parking lot cleared slowly, chrome flashing in the morning light, leaving behind a family on the cusp of mending and a brotherhood bound by promises that outlasted the dawn. The road ahead twisted with unseen trials, but for now the air tasted of possibility, sharp and clean. The morning sun filtered through the hospital's tall windows, casting elongated shadows across the lobby floor like fingers reaching for secrets long buried. Ethan leaned against the nurse's station, his coffee cup steaming in the cool air, the bitter aroma mingling with the lingering scent of rain-soaked leather from his vest. The Iron Oath Riders had thinned out, most heading back to their scattered lives, garages in the valley, ranches on the outskirts. But a core group remained, Marcus tinkering with a bike chain in the lot, Lena reviewing Sarah's chart with Amelia, and Tyler keeping watch from a bench, his tattooed arms folded like a barrier. Victor sat in the side room under Grace's watchful eye, his slumped shoulders a portrait of defeat, but Ethan's instincts prickled. The social worker's earlier whisper about local shadows echoed in his mind, a thread pulling at the edges of this fragile peace. Amelia emerged from Sarah's bay, her face drawn but resolute, wiping her hands on her scrubs. "She's resting now," she said softly to Ethan, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd bridged too many chasms in the night. "The protective order's in motion. Lily can see her soon, supervised." Ethan nodded, his gaze drifting to the girl who sat cross-legged on a vinyl chair, doodling on a notepad with crayons borrowed from the pediatric kit. The bandana around her wrist fluttered slightly as she sketched what looked like a line of shining bikes under a wide sky, her own vision of guardians, born from the rumble that had chased away the dark. "Good," Ethan replied, his words measured. "But this ain't over. Man's got ties that stink of trouble." Outside, the lot hummed with subdued activity. Victor's pickup squatted like a relic, its hood still warm from the drive, mud caked on the tires from back roads that hid more than dirt. Officer Reyes circled it slowly, his radio crackling with updates from dispatch, routine checks, but Ethan's crew knew better. Whispers had circulated among the riders during the night's vigil. Victor Kane wasn't just a factory worker drowning in regret. He'd been seen with rough types from the industrial district, men who peddled favors under the guise of loans, twisting arms until bones cracked. Ethan's own history whispered warnings, the desert betrayal, Jake's blood on the sand from a deal gone sour with insiders who'd worn uniforms like masks. "We ride clean," he'd told his crew at dawn, "but we don't turn blind." Grace stepped out of the questioning room, her clipboard tucked under her arm, expression tight. "He's admitting to the push, says it was an accident fueled by whiskey, but he's dodging questions about his associates, claims it's nothing." She glanced at Ethan, a flicker of unease in her eyes. "You folks, you're not official. Why stick around?" Ethan met her gaze, the scar across his eye pulling taut. "Because promises don't wait for paperwork. That girl's note, it's a call we answer." Grace hesitated, then nodded. The weight of institutional limits evident in her sigh. In her world of forms and filings, the system's gears ground slow, often leaving the vulnerable exposed. The bikers, with their code forged in fire, moved faster, loyalty as engine, honor as fuel. As the clock ticked toward noon, Sarah called for Lily from her bed, her voice a fragile thread weaving through the beeps and murmurs. Amelia escorted the girl in, the door whispering shut behind them like a seal on a new beginning. Mother and daughter embraced, tears silent and salty, the room filling with the soft rustle of sheets and the faint floral hint of hospital soap. "I ran because I was scared," Lily murmured into Sarah's shoulder, her small hands clutching the fabric. "But those men, they came like knights." Sarah stroked her curls, her own bruises hidden under bandages, but the real healing starting in the light of truth spoken aloud. "They did, baby, and we're going to be okay now." In the lobby, Victor rose unsteadily, rubbing his temples as Reyes finished the interview. "I just want to see them," he pleaded, his voice cracking like dry timber. But the officer shook his head, guiding him toward the exit. "Not yet. Court's got to sort this." Victor's eyes flashed with desperation, landing on Ethan. "You think you're heroes? Stay out of my life." Ethan's response was a steady stare, unflinching. "Ain't about you. It's about the promise not to let it happen again." The words landed heavy, stirring something in Victor, a ghost of the man he'd been before the shadows claimed him. He stumbled out into the sunlight, the door swinging shut with a finality that echoed through the hall. But the peace fractured moments later. Tyler's voice cut through from the lot, low and urgent over the phone. "Boss, got eyes on a black SUV circling the block. Plates don't match. Looks like Kane's crowd." Ethan straightened, adrenaline sharpening his senses, the familiar coil of readiness tightening in his gut. Marcus revved his engine once, a warning growl that rippled through the remaining bikes. Lena joined them at the doors, her medic bag slung over her shoulder. "If they're coming for him, or worse, for the family, we need to be ready." The air thickened, the sun's warmth turning oppressive, carrying the faint ozone tang of impending trouble. Grace overheard, her face paling. "This is what I meant. Victor's in deep with some loan sharks. Bad blood from gambling debts. They might think the family's leverage." Ethan signaled his crew, a silent choreography born of roads shared and battles unspoken. They wouldn't charge in. That was the old way, the one that left scars like his. Instead, they'd stand as they always did, a chosen family, weaving protection from threads of loyalty. Dr. Nathan Hale appeared from the corridor, his stethoscope dangling like a pendulum. "Whatever's coming, the hospital's locking down. But you've already changed the tide here." As the SUV made another pass, tires hissing on the drying pavement, Ethan felt the old oath surge, Jake's voice in the wind urging him forward. This wasn't just about one night, it was redemption's chain, linking past failures to present stands. Lily and Sarah, safe in their reunion, represented the innocence he'd sworn to shield. The riders mounted up, engines purring to life in a symphony of resolve, chrome flashing like drawn steel. Victor, spotting the vehicle from the lot's edge, froze, his debts crashing into the light, pulling him toward a reckoning he couldn't outrun. The confrontation brewed under the climbing sun, shadows shortening as resolve lengthened. Ethan led the line, his bike a steadfast anchor, the Brotherhood's emblem catching the light like a beacon. In this moment, justice wasn't a badge or a gavel. It was the quiet power of promises kept, turning the wheel toward healing. The SUV slowed, doors opening to reveal figures cloaked in menace, but the riders held firm, a wall of honor against the encroaching dark. If this chapter's got your heart racing, smash that like button. It helps spread these stories of unbreakable bonds to more ears who need them. The black SUV idled at the edge of the lot, its tinted windows reflecting the midday glare like obsidian shields. the engine's low growl a counterpoint to the Iron Oath rider's steady hum. 3 figures emerged, hard-edged men in rumpled suits that strained over broad shoulders, their faces shadowed by cheap sunglasses and the weight of unpaid debts. The lead one, a stocky enforcer with a neck tattoo snaking up from his collar, scanned the scene with predatory calm, his gaze locking on Victor, who backed away toward his pickup, hands raised in futile placation. Ethan felt the familiar surge, a desert wind whipping through his veins, carrying echoes of oaths sworn under firelit skies. He throttled his bike once, the roar slicing the tension, a signal to his crew. Hold the line, no first blood. Victor stumbled over a curb, his voice cracking as he called out, "This ain't about you guys. I owe them. It's my mess." But the words dissolved in the air, thick with the scent of sun-baked asphalt and lingering rain. The enforcers advanced, boots crunching gravel, one flashing a wad of papers that might have been contracts or threats disguised as legalese. Marcus revved beside Ethan, his prosthetic arm steady on the grip. The whir of its mechanisms, a quiet defiance. Lena dismounted fluidly, positioning herself between the SUV and the hospital doors, her medic's bag at her feet like a dropped gauntlet. "Walk away," she said, her voice clear and unyielding, carrying the timbre of battlefields where she'd saved lives amid chaos. "This family's under our watch." Inside, through the glass, Amelia pressed a hand to the pane, her breath fogging the surface as she watched the standoff unfold. Lily and Sarah, reunited in the bay, paused mid-conversation, the girls' crayon sketches forgotten on the bed. Sarah's face paled, the monitors quickening their beeps in sync with her rising pulse. Those men. "Victor dragged us into this," she whispered, gripping Lily's hand. The daughter's eyes widened, but there was steel in them now, forged by the night's unlikely saviors. Dr. Nathan Hale joined Amelia at the window, his stethoscope forgotten around his neck. "Call security. Now," he murmured. But his tone held respect for the riders outside, a ragtag honor guard, turning the lot into sacred ground. The lead enforcer smirked, pulling a phone from his pocket, its screen glowing with what looked like a ledger of sins. "Kane owes the house $5,000, interests piling. You gonna pay up, or do we collect from what's yours?" His eyes flicked toward the hospital, a veiled promise that twisted Ethan's gut. Memories flooded in. Jake's last stand, betrayed by men in shadows who profited from broken trust, leaving Ethan to carry the ghost of failure across continents and years. He'd built the Iron Oath from that rubble, a family of the road, bound by vows that no debt collector could sever. "You touch them," Ethan rumbled, his bike edging forward without aggression, "and you answer to more than badges." Tyler flanked him, engine idling like a coiled spring, his tattoos shifting as he leaned in. "We've seen your type before, desert rats hiding in suits, but we don't break, we mend." The words hung, a moral gauntlet thrown, stirring unease in the enforcers. Victor, cornered against his truck, slid down the door, his face ashen. "I can pay. Just give me time. Lost my job last month." The admission cracked the air, raw and human, peeling back the monster to reveal a man eroded by choices. Grace emerged from the lobby, flanked by Reyes, her clipboard replaced by a phone dialing for reinforcements. "This is harassment on hospital grounds," she called, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Back off or it's charges." The standoff stretched, seconds elongating under the relentless sun, shadows pooling like spilled ink around the bikes. One enforcer shifted, hand dipping toward his jacket, a gesture that set Marcus's bike roaring in warning, the chrome flashing like bared teeth. But Ethan raised a gloved hand, halting the surge. This wasn't the desert. Violence here would chain them all. Instead, he dismounted, boots thudding solidly, and strode forward, closing the gap with deliberate calm. The enforcer met his stare, sunglasses slipping to reveal eyes hardened by back-alley deals. "What's your play, biker? You ain't cops." Ethan's voice was low, gravel over steel. "We're the promise you forgot. Kane's debts end today, not with threats, but truth." He glanced at Victor, who met his gaze with a flicker of shame, the weight of redemption's call pressing down. From his pocket, Ethan pulled a worn envelope. Funds scraped from the crew's communal pot, rides for charity that now turned to quiet justice. 5 grand, clean slate, but you vanish, and he gets help, real help. The enforcer hesitated, the offer disrupting his script of intimidation. Whispers rippled through the riders, stories of similar stands, pulling souls from the brink without a fist raised. Reyes stepped up, radio in hand, backup sirens faintly audible in the distance. "Deal's off if you push it." The enforcers conferred in murmurs, the SUV's door creaking as another figure watched from within, perhaps the boss calculating losses. Finally, the lead one snatched the envelope, counting bills with rough efficiency. "This squares it. But Kane knows, the house remembers." They retreated, piling into the vehicle with grudging slowness, tires spinning gravel as they peeled away, leaving dust devils swirling in their wake. The lot exhaled, engines quieting to a murmur. Victor rose shakily, staring at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time, a scarred guardian risen from the road's myth. "Why? You don't know us." Ethan's scar pulled as he smiled faintly, the sun warming his back. "Knew someone once who needed the same. Promised I'd pay it forward." Inside, Amelia opened the doors, ushering the group back to safety, her eyes bright with unspoken thanks. Lily ran to Ethan, hugging his leg, the bandana brushing his knee like a medal of trust. As afternoon light slanted golden across the building, Sarah joined them in the lobby, propped on a wheelchair, her hand in Victor's for a tentative moment. Not forgiveness, but a bridge to amends. Grace coordinated counseling referrals, the system's wheels turning faster under the pressure of witnessed resolve. The remaining riders gathered, sharing nods and low laughs, their bond a living tapestry of chosen kin. But Ethan lingered by the window, horizon calling. Whispers from Reyes hinted at deeper webs, the house tied to corruption that snaked through the city, testing oaths yet unbroken. Tyler clapped Ethan's shoulder, voice rough with camaraderie. "Road's clear for now, boss, but if they circle back..." Ethan nodded, mounting his bike, the engine's vibration a pulse of purpose. Lena checked Sarah one last time, her touch gentle as a vow. The crew revved in farewell, a chorus fading into the distance, leaving the hospital bathed in light, a sanctuary forged from night's shadows. Yet, in Ethan's rear view, the SUV's taillights lingered on a distant road, a reminder that promises demanded vigilance, redemption, a journey without end. The sun dipped lower, casting long roads ahead, where loyalty would ride eternal. The afternoon sun hung low over St. Hope General, painting the parking lot in warm amber hues that softened the edges of the lingering tension. Ethan's bike idled beneath him, its engine a contented purr, the chrome accents catching the light like polished promises. The black SUV had vanished into the haze of the distant highway, its taillights swallowed by the horizon, but the echo of confrontation lingered in the air, sharp as exhaust, heavy as unresolved debts. Victor stood by his pickup, hands shoved deep in his pockets, the envelope's absence a void that mirrored the hollow in his chest. He glanced at Sarah's wheelchair, where she sat with Lily curled against her side, the girl's head resting on her mother's lap like a bird finding shelter. For the first time in years, the family's fractures seemed mended, if only by threads of fragile hope. Amelia wheeled Sarah forward, the rubber tires whispering over the asphalt, her scrubs still bearing faint creases from the night's vigil. "Take it slow," she advised softly, her eyes meeting Ethan's with a depth of gratitude that needed no words. The nurse had seen endings like this before, cycles broken not by force, but by the quiet stand of strangers who chose to care. Dr. Nathan Hale flanked them, his coat billowing slightly in the breeze, a stethoscope dangling like a forgotten talisman. "Vitals are stable. Follow up in a week, and we'll get you both into support groups." His voice carried the steady rhythm of healing, a counterpoint to the chaos that had rolled in on two wheels. Victor cleared his throat, stepping closer, his boots scuffing the gravel. The enforcers retreated, stripped away his bluster, leaving a man raw and exposed, the scent of whiskey on his breath now mingled with the clean bite of regret. I don't know how to thank you," he said to Ethan, his gaze dropping to the ground, tracing the shadows cast by the bikes. "That money, it's more than I deserved. I thought I was protecting them, but I was the storm." The admission hung between them, vulnerable as a confession in the fading light. Ethan dismounted, his leather creaking, and placed a hand on Victor's shoulder, not in judgment, but in the solid grip of shared burdens. "We all chase ghosts, Kane. Mine came from a desert a long time ago. Promised a brother I'd watch for the ones left behind. It's just keeping that word." Lily lifted her head, her dark curls tousled by the wind, the bandana around her wrist fluttering like a flag of small victories. She extended a crayon drawing toward Victor, a family on bikes, riding under a vast sky, no shadows in sight. "You can come back, Daddy, but promise to be gentle." Her voice was a whisper, pure and piercing, cutting through the cynicism that had clouded the day. Victor knelt, taking the paper with trembling fingers, tears carving tracks down his weathered cheeks. Sarah reached out, her hand brushing his, the touch tentative yet electric, a spark reigniting what had been buried under layers of pain. "We start over," she murmured, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "No more hiding. Together or not at all." Grace observed from the hospital steps, her clipboard finally set aside, the weight of bureaucracy yielding to the human tide. Officer Reyes holstered his radio. The sirens from earlier now a distant memory, replaced by the soft coo of pigeons scattering across the lot. "Charges pending on the incident," he said gruffly to Victor, but his tone held less edge, softened by the scene unfolding. "Get clean, Kane. Court's got programs. Use 'em." The cop nodded to Ethan, a rare bridge between worlds. Badges and brothers, both sworn to a form of justice that outlasted the night. Marcus revved his engine once, a low salute, his prosthetic arm gleaming as he adjusted his grip. Lena packed her bag, slinging it over her shoulder with a satisfied sigh, the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to her like a badge of her own. Tyler clapped Victor on the back, his tattoos flexing like living maps of survival. "Road's long, man, but you've got riders in your corner now." The crew began to mount up, engines coughing to life in a staggered chorus, Harleys and choppers forming a loose formation, their headlights flickering on against the encroaching dusk. Ethan lingered a moment longer, scanning the horizon where the SUV had fled. Whispers from Reyes confirmed the deeper web. The house was a syndicate with tendrils in City Hall, corruption festering like an untreated wound. But for today, the oath held. Redemption wasn't a single ride, but an endless highway of choices. He turned to Lily, crouching to her level. "You write that note, kid. Changed everything. Remember, promises are your armor." As the convoy pulled out, tires humming over the pavement, the lot emptied like a stage after the final act. Dust swirled in their wake, carrying the mingled aromas of gasoline and fresh resolve. Sarah and Victor loaded into an ambulance for transport to a safe house, Lily waving from the window, her drawing clutched tight. Amelia watched them go, the sun dipping behind the hospital, casting long shadows that danced like freed spirits. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed on, but the air felt lighter, infused with the echo of engines, a reminder that family wasn't always born, but chosen, forged in the fire of standing firm. Ethan led the ride into the twilight, the wind whipping his face, scars tingling under the cooling air. Jake's voice rode with him, a ghost turned guardian, the desert oath evolving into this. A brotherhood that turned notes into lifelines, debts into dawns. Miles stretched ahead, twisting through valleys and passes where new calls might summon them. But in the rear view, St. Hope General shrank to a beacon, its windows glowing with the promise of mended lives. Honor wasn't loud, it rumbled deep, a legacy etched in chrome and courage, binding the broken into something unbreakable. The road curved onward, endless and true, carrying the iron oath into the gathering night, ready for whatever shadows lay waiting, their loyalty the light that never faded. Thank you for riding along on this journey of unbreakable promises and chosen family. If these stories of quiet courage touch your heart, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales that remind us what it means to stand tall. Your support keeps the road open for everyone.